All right, I now come to this fifth section, War as Law. And some of you will be familiar with some of this material. You'll have heard it before in more detail. So it's a little sort of reminder, refresher, and for those of you who haven't heard of any of it, it's a little, as I say, it's just a little sort of introduction to the concept of the rules of war, which there are rules of war in the West and in the East. We have apparently embraced the rule of law in the West, basically in North America. Although, of course, as you all know, the law is only as good as what you can afford. It's a little less true in Canada, although when you look at the way the Indigenous population has been treated, you need deep pockets to be able to pay for good legal counsel, right? I mean, who are you going to put your money on? A corporation which can afford a bank of lawyers. By that I mean, I don't mean an act like you go to the bank and you get you withdraw a lawyer. I need to withdraw 2 lawyers. That's not a bad idea. A bank of lawyers. This is the bank of law. I'd like to withdraw 2 litigators and a divorce attorney, please. Anyway, how deep is the bench, basically, for lawyers in a big corporation? They've got people on staff, and they'll have a legal department. Okay, so Leonidas wishes his corrupt seniors to follow law and Lycurgus or Lycurgus, depending on your pronunciation. And to Leonidas, he says he wants to light a fire that will burn in the hearts of free men for all the centuries yet to be. No retreat, no surrender. That is Spartan law. And by Spartan law, we will stand and fight and die. The law. We do not sacrifice the rule of law to the will and whim of men. That is the old way, the old, sad, stupid way. The way of Xerxes and every creature like him. The new age has begun, an age of great deeds, an age of reason, an age of justice, an age of law. And all will know that 300 Spartans gave their last breath to defend it on page 64. As I say, oh man, it's hard to know how Miller wrote this stuff with a straight face. I mean, did he crack himself up when he was writing it? It's like, oh, okay, what else can I use? But you can see that, unfortunately, this is still really the belief system, particularly in the military. I mean, if you ask people, why did you, especially the senior military, why did you join? They'll give you this kind of stuff. And you're like, really? Are you serious? They're like, well, I needed to make a living. You get all this other stuff. But if you want the philosophy, they'll give you this stuff because they were trained with it. This is what, you're going to get this if you go through Annapolis and you go into the Navy, or you go through the Air Force Academy out in Colorado Springs, or you go to West Point. The various training schools for officers in the different military services. Anyway, you can see that wherever there is a call to war, it is also to democracy and to law that people will appeal. And this is exactly what happened in the last, say, 20 years, was that people kept saying, when people like me and other, I mean, it's not as though I was special, it was just people who were like me and people like me who were sort of saying, well, why are we fighting in Iraq and Afghanistan? Why is Canada in Afghanistan? It's like people will say to protect democracy. It's like, how are the Afghans threatening our democracy exactly right now? Like, what is the threat exactly? They're going to come over here and they're going to threaten democracy. It's like, well, 9/11. So yeah, well, 9/11 was done by the Afghan people, or was it done by Osama bin Laden, who was operating as a non-state actor? I thought that's what the deal was. So that he had this cadre of, anyway, you can see. But this, the explanation for, like, why are we there? Why were we there for 10 years? Democracy. It's like, okay, what kind of democracy? It may be there may be little memory in the last number of years that in lifetimes of basically, so people like me and your parents, that we have seen, for instance, Japanese Americans and Canadians interned in concentration camps during World War II. That was the thing that happened. We did that here. We did it in Vancouver. I mean, they used the Pacific National Exhibition grounds to imprison and hold Japanese Asians who were they weren't even suspected of being traitors or spies. They were just Asian. That was their sin. And so Canadians just rounded them up and said, okay, in you go. African Americans marching peacefully for civil rights. Oh, have we not just had a summer of this? Attacked by, well, in the 60s by the National Guard with water cannon and dogs, attack dogs. Women prevented from exercising their right to control their own bodies. Remember, having children, if you can control your own body, maybe you're not going to have children and send them to war. Like, that's actually, and this was something that happened in the 60s where second wave feminists said, I don't want to send my child to war, so I'm not going to have children. I'm not going to have children until I can see that I can protect them from the state, which wants to send them to war. It's like, seems fair enough. Well, guess what? If the state is like, yeah, well, you're going to have children. That's what we decide. We're men, and we're saying you're going to have children. So, abortion rights, which is, let's say pro-choice, because you want to have the right to choose what you do with your body. If the issue is like, can that be weaponized? It already is. Is abortion a military-industrial complex issue? Of course it is. Okay, so there's no mistake that the pro-choice movement gathered its real initial strength during the protests against the Vietnam War in the 60s and the early 70s. Indefinite internment in physically brutal conditions of people with no access to lawyers, which is at the basis of even Roman law, which is the right, basically the right not to be incarcerated, not to have the state take your body over, and charged with no crimes. And this happened right away. In 2001, Afghan nationals were taken and held and put in prisons, and they had no recourse to the law at all. Which is, this is habeas corpus, basically. Do you have the body? And if the state has your body and you don't have access to the law to fight them, what are you planning on doing about that? Nothing. You're going to wait. And if you're... Okay. Seizure of persons without warrant based on their physical appearance or ethnic background, irrespective of current nationality. So there were people like Canadian Rohinton Mistry, who was a famous novelist, who was he just got tired of crossing the border in 2002 and 2003 because he would go to the border and they'd keep him. And when they would do this happened in the early days. It's still happening now. I know certainly I have a number of students of color who, they maybe say South Asian, right? So they're from some part of the subcontinent. Could be Pakistan, could be India, some might be North India, South India, whatever. But they look Middle Eastern, and the person's like, they say, I'm from whatever, Kerala. And the agent who they're trying to go through, to fly home, and they have to fly through the United States, and then from the United States to Europe, and then so on. And so they have to get through the United States. The United States says, well, you say you're South Asian, but you look Middle Eastern to us. We're just going to keep you. Well, the TSA, the Transport Security Administration, which is the newly essentially affected piece of the Department of Homeland Security, which didn't exist before 9/11. I mean, DHS, Homeland Security, was probably one of the most grievous acts of war against the civilian population. We're still suffering from. Good luck if you go through an airport and you face DHS and you're a person of color. It's not a good thing. As I say, this Rohinton Mistry, well, he was like, I'm not going, because what would happen is they put him in a room. They're like, well, we don't believe you. We don't believe that we'll need to check you out. And so they would just stick him in a room somewhere and let him sit there for 12, 14 hours. That's it. We're just, and then just let go. It's like, oh, you can, or turn around, which also happened. So it's like, no, we're not letting you in. We'll keep you for 12 hours illegally. So people say, well, that's illegal. It's like, sure, it's illegal if you believe that you have access to law, and these are the laws that we're supposed to be, that we're all in love with, apparently. Unless, of course, you're a person of color, in which case they don't seem to apply to you. You don't get to have them. Everybody else gets to have those rights, but not you. You can proceed as long as we can do a penetrative cavity search on you. No thanks. I don't think I needed to go to New York that badly. Promote my book. I don't think I'll go. It all of this stuff is so. What are you going to do? You're going to call up your government. How are you going to do that? You're going to call up your MP, your MPP, and say, my name is so and so. I'm being held. If you have a phone call, I'm being held at the border at Detroit without access to a lawyer. Please help me. And you get the phone mail that says, we'll get back to you in the next 2 or 3 working days. And then what are you planning on doing? So you come out and you're like, I was held for 12 hours. So you go and write to the feds, and the feds say, geez, that's not very good. I guess we'll go and talk to Donald Trump about that and make sure they don't hold anybody. It's like, this is so patently ridiculous. Like, what are you planning on doing? So the best thing to do is avoid it, right? So my students who would be needing to fly home to their parents' home, usually in, say, the Middle East or in South Asia, would fly through Frankfurt and direct to Frankfurt from Canada to avoid the American system entirely. Yeah, well, absolutely. It's not as though what's being practiced there obeys what is understood to be the rule of law, even in America. Those are not constitutional. Those are not constitutional rights. The Bill of Rights guarantees no seizure of the person without basically access to law. But these are extra legal proceedings, which of course are all okay because it was a time of war. Well, this is it. We assume and take for granted that we live in a democracy with a free press. And when compared to repressive regimes that operate under martial law, we do live in a much more open culture with a great deal of freedom. Absolutely, yeah. But when we agree to go to war, whether we agree to it or not, which is another whole difference. What is it that makes such a war legal? Okay. And so here is when I talk about the stuff which you may be familiar with, and I'll put a couple of these terms up on the screen. The first one that you need to know is jus ad bellum, which is the title given to the branch of law or legal inquiry, that defines legitimate reasons to go to war. So when is it legal or legitimate to go to war in the eyes of, say, the United Nations? Which is supposed to be the world's police body, basically, and it's a good idea. I mean, it just has to have real power. You can't, the Security Council, the people who actually made it, the nations that actually brought it together and said, we are the powers that are in the internal council. If one of them votes against it, that's it. It's over. It's like, well, so that's the end of that. But these are the people who are going to decide and have decided over the course of years at The Hague in Switzerland and in Geneva generally, what is going to render a cause just. And this jus ad bellum basically means when is it just, jus, to go ad to war, bellum, and bellum is the Latin for war. So the Charter of the United Nations, for instance, declares in Article 2 that, quote, all members shall refrain in their international relations from the threat or the use of force against territorial integrity or political independence of any state or in any other manner inconsistent with the purposes of the United Nations. So you're not supposed to use war as a threat. You're not supposed to threaten war. Once you do go to war, there's a long discussion about that, but once you do go to war, then you have to make sure that you're fighting within the rules of war. And again, this may sound stupid, but there are these rules, and they're under another Latin phrase, jus in bello, which means when justice during war, in wartime. And this is the set of laws that come into effect once you've gone to war, whether it's legal or not. And the purpose is to regulate how wars are fought without prejudice as to the reasons of how or why they were begun. So it doesn't really matter at this point whether it was right or wrong. It's like, okay, now these two nations, or three or four, whatever, are at war. And so are they fighting fair? And by fighting unfair, we're talking about, say, weapons you shouldn't be using, like poison gas, which everybody after World War One, people were like, no more poison gas. Both sides, all the sides. The French, the Germans, the Italians, the Canadians, the Brits all said, the Americans, no more poison gas. It's too bad. If everybody doesn't use it, nobody will use it. That's the deal. Nobody will use poison gas on the battlefield. And that was a great blessing because it was such a terrible, it's just a brutal weapon. Human beings have produced incredibly bad ways of, brutal, cruel ways of killing people. Poison gas is right up there with them as one of them. What it comes down to in the eyes of many people is that a basic sense of might makes right. That if you if you can go to a country and smack it around and knock over its leadership and cause regime change, as the Bush White House like to call it, which is one of those nice clean phrases, then that's, in the end, you did the right thing. And Bush will still say this, even though Bush now looks like a genius compared to Trump, who most people do, that he will still say, no, we were right to go to Iraq, we were right to kill Saddam, we were right to knock over the country, cause a civil war. Okay. So while Leonidas fights to protect his state, which is considered to be just, fighting off an aggressor is considered to be a just cause, and is supported by jus ad bellum, I guess, is a reasonable reason to go to war. But Miller casts Xerxes as this sort of politically correct, swinish, queer politician, not sort of like Satan. And Xerxes says, Leonidas, let us reason together. It would be a regrettable waste. It would be nothing short of madness, were you and your valiant troops to perish, all because of a simple, unavoidable misunderstanding. So this should sound like somebody who's selling insurance to you. It sounds very bureaucratic, and it's all very smooth and euphemistic, and Miller here is after the corporate state. He sees Xerxes as sort of being this massive corporate entity, and Leonidas says, don't lose sleep wrongly over us, and this is typical sort of Leonidas, Clint Eastwood, or, Arnold Schwarzenegger, I'll be back, okay, fine. We're having the time of our lives. Brave words, Spartan words, says Xerxes. Yours is a fascinating tribe. There's much our cultures could share. Yeah, we've been sharing our culture with you all morning, says Leonidas, according to stab, 51. And so this is the same kind of wise-ass, hard-boiled approach to heroes that Americans just generally have. We expect to see it in that thing with Chris Pratt. What the hell was it? Guardians of the Galaxy. It doesn't matter whether it's that or Deadpool or Wonder Woman. It's all the same stuff. Same stuff, different gender, different race, different. It's all the same idea. Smartass, wisecracking, laconic. I use that word deliberately. Yeah, look it up. Look up Laconia. After all, this is Sparta. That's what the Americans would like you to believe. It isn't, but they'd like it.